Colorado congressman sued, accused of being reckless and dangerous during the pandemic. Remember the day that masks became a thing? It was awkward.
If you do Twitter or TikTok or Facebook, show folks what you're doing to be clever and cool about wearing masks.
The CDC made masks much less of a thing starting today, and this too could be awkward. You know, for all the talk about vaccinating kids, is that really the age group that is keeping Colorado from herd immunity? Let's look at the numbers. And the little guy who stood up for the big mesa. We think that nature will always exist. Sometimes it takes humans who care a lot. That's next. There are Coloradans who have mocked and made light of the pandemic and the basic precautions that most of us have taken. And we've elected some of those folks to represent us in Congress. Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn is now getting sued by a former staffer who says the congressman blew off pandemic protections and then fired him for speaking up about it. Our Marshall Zellinger has read through that lawsuit that was filed against the congressman today. And Marshall, it does include some issues beyond COVID.
Yeah, the lawsuit spells out a number of allegations from indifference to COVID-19 protocols to using work staff for personal errands.
The lawsuit filed today is from a former staffer named Brandon Pope. He was hired to work in the Colorado District Office of Republican Congressman Doug Lamborn, who represents the 5th District covering El Paso, Teller, Fremont, Park, and Chaffee counties. Pope claims he spoke up for telework and social distancing, and that the congressman and his wife both claimed COVID was a hoax being used to alter the course of the congressional and presidential elections. Lamborn was back in Colorado in early October when staffers in D.C. tested positive. Pope claims that Lamborn's chief of staff instructed the Colorado staff to not tell anyone, including families, roommates, or friends, that they had been in close contact with infected individuals and were potentially carrying COVID-19. The lawsuit claims a district staffer tested positive days later. In November, Lamborn tested positive for COVID, and so did Pope. He claims he was fired in December for his vocal opposition to Lamborn's reckless approach to COVID-19. In an emailed statement, Lamborn's communication director, Cassandra Sebastian, wrote, "The workplace safety allegations made by Mr. Pope are unsubstantiated and did not result in the termination of his employment. In a follow-up phone call, she would not tell me why he's no longer employed."
There are other claims in that lawsuit that do not have to do with COVID, as we said, meant to illustrate how Lamborn has a disregard for the rules, according to the lawsuit. One claim is that Lamborn allowed his son to live in a storage area in the basement of the U.S. Capitol while he relocated to Washington, D.C. for work. There's also a section on personal errands run by the staff for Lamborn's family. Pope is suing under what's called the Congressional Accountability Act, which basically requires Congress to follow the same workplace safety laws any business is required. And Kyle, as you saw at the end of that statement from Lamborn's communications director, it ended with, he looks forward to full vindication as all facts come to light.
The boss's kid living in the basement of the business would indeed be unusual at most any business in America. Marshall, thank you. So public health experts in Colorado are holding out hope against the evidence that we could be reaching herd immunity at some point. And you'll often hear that it's younger adults who are kind of blamed and shamed for holding us back. A SmartNext viewer emailed me this morning. Dave, age 59. Dave included a chart, and he asked that we take a closer look at that assumption. So our Anusha Roy joins us now to break it down. Anusha?
Yeah, so thanks to that clever viewer, right, we started taking a closer look at what was going on. And it turns out that in Denver, those who are in their 30s and even those who are in their 20s have now started outpacing those who are getting vaccines in their 40s and 50s. This is a trend that's just started to show up. It's a slight increase in that younger age group, but definitely happening in the city of Denver. But at the same time, you've started seeing strategies like offering vaccines at Red Rock concerts starting this week. The city's also looking into offering vaccines at the zoo or during First Friday in the Santa Fe Art District. So what exactly is the strategy here, right? Like, who is the city trying to reach right now? Well, the city's Department of Emergency Management said at this point, it's just about making it as easy as possible. This is for maybe people who don't have a ton of time off. Maybe they've just got one day off in the week and they just want to spend it with their family. And so the city is trying to bring these vaccines to the very places that people are now heading out to have some fun.
Definitely less about age and more about where are we going to bring this to folks, and just reduce every barrier and honestly just start getting rid of those excuses.
Of course, we've talked about, right, this shift away from, first focusing on those who are at the highest risk of getting COVID and making sure they're vaccinated, and then opening it up to those who may be at a lower risk. That all fits in with what Dr. Michelle Barron with UC Health is saying, that, getting vaccinated across the board is really important, but there are some age groups that we do need to be paying attention to right now, and that is those younger and healthier people, 20 to 40, if we really do want to reach that herd immunity.
We can continue on our trajectory and just keep working on it. It's like climbing a 14er. You just got to keep going. Even though you getting to the top, is that last mile is always the hardest.
Speaking of, right, we've heard about that demand for vaccines fluctuating here in Colorado, which is something very important to keep an eye on. And the big change for the age group, right, is the 12 to 15-year-olds now eligible for vaccines. They've actually started getting vaccines already in Colorado. This is particularly important because today the state was saying our high schoolers and our middle schoolers, they are showing the highest positivity rates for case rates right now in Colorado. So this is a big chunk of people and an important group. But Kyle, on its own, it's not enough to clinch herd immunity. It's got to go beyond them.
Anusha, the other day I heard the smart doctor explaining herd immunity in a good way, that we kind of use that shorthand, but what we're actually referring to is the threshold of herd immunity at which the virus can't easily find hosts. But it's not an all or nothing proposition. If we say that that number is 80%, well then 70 is good, and 75% is better, and 77% is better than that. It's an aspirational goal that even if we don't make it, getting close is better than not.
Yeah, absolutely. And, it is that number that we've all been holding on to and just trying so hard to get to. But this whole time, it's been this moving target, right? And there's a whole bunch of variables to pay attention to. A big one is going to be the variants and how contagious they are. And that's going to also be impacting that percentage that we want to reach. And so today, the state epidemiologist was saying, she's holding on to hope. She thinks Colorado's got a decent chance at reaching herd immunity, but also was really frank and said this is going to be a hard challenge for us to meet as well. And she said that some models are showing that Colorado might be able to reach that lower threshold this summer, but other doctors were saying maybe in the fall. And of course, a lot of this is just going to depend on how our vaccine rates play out.
Yeah, we don't want people to be discouraged today. Today is a very encouraging day in the fight. Anusha, thank you. Another reason why we're closing in on almost half of Colorado's population being at least partially vaccinated right now. 38.4% are done. It's more than 2.2 million people, and just over 500,000 people are waiting on their second doses. So I got to confess, I've been secretly jealous of the people who had joyful vaccine experiences. People cheering, room full of excitement. My vaccine experience was actually pretty mundane. And so was this morning's trip to the grocery store. Until the man in front of me in the pharmacy line turned around, gestured to his arm, made the shot motion. He was clearly grinning ear to ear, and he gave me a big thumbs up. It appeared that he might not speak English, but we didn't need any words at this point because I was already grinning back at the guy, giving him the thumbs up in return. That man was generous enough to share his joy with me, along with a reminder that there are Coloradans out there who really want to get the vaccine who have not gotten it yet. Whether the barrier is information or transportation or an employer who's willing to give somebody a day off if they have to deal with side effects. Now, I was fortunate enough to have those things, so I ran out and got my shot and didn't have a very exciting vaccine experience. Until today, when a stranger shared his. Tonight's next question comes from Wendy.
What if a 12 to 15-year-old wants to get the vaccine, but their parents are anti-vaxxers? How can they get protection?
Wendy, we took your question to the state.
And in our state, parental consent is required for vaccination. We'll often see in pediatric clinics a 15-year-old come in for a sports physical without their parent, and the office can call them and talk to the parent and get verbal consent for vaccination.
Let's talk about another reason to be positive today. We're going to get to see all your beautiful faces again, even the mouth and the chin parts. The CDC is finally easing mask guidelines for vaccinated people to bring them in line with the best science and, frankly, common sense. So the CDC says no more need for masking and social distancing for the vaccinated indoors and out in most situations. CDC still recommends you wear a mask if you're in a crowded place like a bus or a train or a plane or a hospital. And we do have to remember Colorado still has a statewide mask mandate, but the governor's office says this afternoon they expect to update their guidelines to mirror what the CDC is saying shortly. This is happening. Like this is a big day. So now it's up to us and our decisions. So I want to hear from you on this. What adjustments are you going to make in your life based on this new CDC mask and distance guidelines? Because my guess is that you might be making some decisions that I hadn't thought of, maybe even for reasons that I hadn't considered. So I'm hoping that you can guide our discussion going forward on this. Given the CDC today relaxing mask guidelines and distancing for the vaccinated, how will your life change, your choices? I read every single email that comes to next@9news.com and every single tweet that comes in with the hashtag #HeyNext. It's been called the gateway to the Rockies, and he was the gateway's guardian.
I don't know many people that would give 23 years of pro bono legal work.
He gave and gave, so we would all have that special place to share. With Denver's housing market so absurd, we look at whether driving a ways out of town still delivers a bargain. Next. We talked so much about how wild Denver's housing market is lately, and that's not quite right. It's Colorado's housing market. The state's median single home price shot up more in the month of April than it typically does in a full year. It's now up to $580,000. The very nicest Next viewer, Sherry, emailed me yesterday saying, if homes are too expensive in Denver, she welcomed everybody to join her in Arvada. And that's very kind, and we wish it was that simple. Our Alexander Lewis talked with real estate experts who said that driving out of town just a bit and finding cheaper prices is not as easy as it used to be.
It's interesting when you look at these statistics. I mean, this isn't just Denver Metro. I mean, it is record low numbers of available homes in all of the 11 counties. And I think, Kelly, you touched on this a little bit. Does COVID have something to do with that as well? People are you finding to move further out?
Yeah, I think, people are willing to move farther out because that tends to be where it's more affordable. I think we have an extreme situation relating to affordability. As prices go up so quickly, wages do not follow those prices. And so what we're finding is that people cannot afford to live on the basic Front Range anymore. And so they're willing to drive to find a place that is actually affordable for them.
I think there's an old saying that says that you drive until you qualify. And if you got to keep going out further and further before you can qualify, unfortunately, that's what people have to do sometimes.
I had an experience today. I had a client say, "Hi, I'd like to look at this property today," and I had to Google the town. I've been in this business for 26 years. I'd never heard of the town. Turns out it's south and east of Strasburg. Hadn't heard of it, but now I have.
Wow, guy hadn't heard of the town. Alex's whole hour-long conversation with those real estate experts is on 9news.com. I've watched a lot more of it. It's really interesting. They go through a stack of your questions, from how to make the most competitive offer on a home these days to whether this is likely to become a housing bubble that bursts.
A beautiful spring day, and in spite of the late afternoon cloud cover, temperatures way above average for some areas. 75 in Denver, almost 80 in Lamar. We did see 82 in Grand Junction. We're tracking a couple of isolated gusty thunderstorms moving across the northeastern plains into Nebraska. They'll move out quickly, but we could see the same scene play out again tomorrow with more widespread showers and thunderstorms Sunday into Monday, which will mean a cooler second half of your weekend and a better chance for rain. Tonight, partly cloudy and mild, low 45. Tomorrow with sunshine, high 74, a gusty late day storm, mainly east. A better chance of rain from storms Sunday and Monday, and a cooling trend with 60s to round out the weekend and for the first couple of days of next week.
It's more than just a convenient hike for people in the metro area.
So had they destroyed South Table Mountain, they would have destroyed history.
Carl knew that, so he spent decades fighting to protect it. The largely unknown legacy of Carl. Next. I'm sorry to say that we got news from the Eagle's Nest that so many people watch at Stanley Lake and through this program, and it's not good news. So, last time we checked on the Eagles earlier this spring, they just had an eaglet. The park's Facebook page says that sometime today that nest collapsed, and the eaglet was not strong enough to leave the nest on its own and died. As a protected species, the eaglet's body has now been taken to the National Eagle Repository. And next time you're hiking South Table Mountain, while you're up there, look around and say, "Thank you, Carl." Without a man named Carl Iberger and his years of selfless dedication, that beautiful spot would be an empty pit.
This book is a book I put together. It's about 54 pages. I had to go through 17 boxes of legal work, and I found tons of newspaper articles. He was handsome. My dad, Carl F. Iberger Jr., was a prominent lawyer in Denver, and he mostly did labor law. There's my dad.
Well, I thought that maybe we could make a story out of South Table Mountain, which has never really been told.
Yes, Carl's Point is named after my dad. All the way along here is South Table Mountain. He was defending the citizens of Golden against the quarrying of the mine.
Very simply, we're not environmentalists, but we're concerned citizens.
Yeah, these are the plans for the quarry. Right below Carl's Point is the KT boundary. The KT boundary is the Cretaceous and Tertiary boundary. So had they destroyed South Table Mountain, they would have destroyed history.
Quarrying would take 75 years. It would involve 50,000 pounds of explosive. They basically said that this was the wrong thing at the wrong time.
And Dad just kept fighting.
Major considerations were air pollution and noise and water pollution.
I don't know many people that would give 23 years of pro bono legal work and for the little guy. He always fought for the little guy. I wish he was thanked more. Just something. June 6th, 2021, we're going to honor my father at Carl's Point.
The Denver Post called these mountains the gateway to the Rockies, and they certainly were and should be preserved.
If he was up there, he'd be humbled. It's time to recognize people that gave so much work and so much time.
Appreciate Mary sharing her father's legacy with our photojournalist Foster Gaines. There's going to be a commemoration ceremony next month at Carl's Point. They're limiting it to 30 people because of COVID. If you'd like to learn more about Carl's legacy and his life, his daughter set up a website. The address is there at the bottom of your screen, carliberger.com. Your feedback, and there's a slew of it tonight. Next. About every 10 seconds, the email dings with another note from one of you talking about how you plan to approach masks and social distancing. I'll be honest with you, so many of you have written in, there's no way for me to physically read all of your notes prior to the end of this broadcast. So I'm going to sit down tonight, read these, get back in touch with a lot of you as we kind of guide our conversation going forward. I love, though, that Deb and Bertha wrote in and said, Kyle, many of us have discovered that we are better looking with masks on, she says, so unmasking presents us with yet another dilemma. A number of you have added to your notes tonight. I hope that people will respect my decision. Something for us to talk about next time.